Good evening, good afternoon. I'm so glad that, it's a very rainy day, but you've made it to come and share with us the week-long series of events designed to bring our contribution to Miami. When I started to think about, and I'll ask Grace just to say, because there are some who are here and don't speak English from time to time, I will stop and do a short resume in summary of what I'm saying in French so they can have a better appreciation. So the last year, 2 years ago, I was visiting friends on the northeast side of my neighborhood, that's beyond Miami Garden. And we happened to hear about the killing of Trevor Martin, a young Miami teenager who went to visit his father in Sanford. Now, it's happened, though, that every year when my wife is going back to Cornell University, where she teaches, I will drive her car to Stanford because that's where the auto train stops from Virginia to Sanford. And when, during the trials of Zimmerman, I was not, as I was watching, I was no longer thinking about the young man, but rather the witnesses. And among the witnesses, there were a young Haitian, Larry Shanti. And if you go back to the video and or the transcripts, and you look at the ways in which the prosecutor treated her, one could have a better understanding of the title of this exhibition, Back to Black. Here is a girl who speaks French, Spanish, German, and English with a Haitian accent. In other words, she is no longer diglossia within the language of what we call linguistic, but she is triglossia. Yet it is her accent that were really advanced to kind of delegitimize her testimony. And the prosecutor will say something like, you know, she's difficult to understand. I know how you get lost because of her accent. Ignoring that, himself, the prosecutor, have an accent. But the normalization of his accent as the accent of what it means to be human, what a human accent is. And any accent which is not that or is not attempting, striving to be that, is a secondary human action. So I began to think about last year as I attended the Sorbonne's conference on the Caribbean, the ways in which we still talk about people of African descent. Now, mindful that this is not a new phenomenon, because if you look at most of the classical books written on Africa, those that wrote the books never been to Africa. So, for example, today, even if you go to Belgium, you have one of the biggest museums of Tervuren, who wrote extensively about the inferiority of black people. He never been to Africa. Yet they have built a museum of African art bearing his name. Branly is another case, which today, the biggest museum in Paris, one of the biggest, is named after. He had extensively written, but never went to Africa. I am saying these to try to walk with you the points of connections. How these Trayvon Martin, Museum of Televisions, K. Branly, how do they fit? How do sometimes in the neighborhood we see people so light in skins that we think they white? How also we end up sometimes looking at our own people in the neighborhood and turn around and call them these people. These are things that I have been looking at within this exhibition I call Back to Black. Now hear me. I am not interested in a claim of tribalism. I am not interested in the glorification of blackness. I am trying to look at how artists of African descent have attempted to formulate responses to these things that are happening in the past 10 years. So if you take Trayvon Martin's, Lashanta Williams, and you look at then how we are told in Miami and in the United States that for black art to be contemporary, it has to remove itself from color. It has to be monochromatic, because monochromatism, gray shade, silver shade installations, those are the carriers of the contemporary. Yet, if the contemporary is means just what is now, then each and every people of the world must have, and definitely will have, its understanding of how it chooses to be contemporary. Very important. Because today in the art world, particularly for young black artists or young black cultural entrepreneur, fitting into the trend is more important than be a trendsetter. And this is very paradoxical in the study of black people in the United States, because whatever is trend in the United States is first and foremost black. That is, at the heart of American culture is black culture. So then, in a very bizarre way, we are witnessing this now self-editing. We are editing ourselves of these fundamental roles we have always played in the development of what we call American culture. That is, yes, we don't have the tradition of classical music. We are a young country. But we have given to the world a form of musical expression that is equal, if not superior, to classical music, and that is jazz. Jazz is the contribution of America to the canon. So while it is both a black production and an American identification. The second point then in the process of the title of this show is now how art and neighborhood, which for a very long time in Miami, black decision makers have ignored. Except Arthur Thiel, in the process of building the Little Haiti Cultural Center. So then, while people think that I am downgrading myself, at least that's what I heard among the mainstream curators, that how can I be from a curator at the African American Library, became now director, the first black director of the Museum of Contemporary Art. Now I'm curating a show in Overtown. But they're missing the point. Right? I came to the United States after living in France for 22 years, decided to go back home. And when I got back home and I was building my house home, and the Minister of Culture of Senegal called me and said, "Oh, welcome home. By the way, the director of the National Dance of Senegal just resigned, and we have a contract for 25 city tour of the United States." I said, "I'm not your guy. I don't know nothing about dance. He said, didn't you study cultural studies? I said, yes. He said, well, who pay your studies? I said, the state? He said, have you ever worked for the state of Senegal since you graduated? I said, no. He said, but you know it's a requirement when you were signing that scholarship. I said, yeah. He said, "Oh, okay. So either you will take the dance troupe or I'll put you in jail." Well, so, and that is how, basically, part of my story with the United States, at least Miami, began. I brought the National Dance Troupe of Senegal, 48 dancers. When the tour ended, we went to the airport, JFK, I saw only 12. Right. I didn't know. I never did that. So they will come and said, can you give me my passport? You know, if I use my passport, I will buy things duty free. Oh, I know you don't know because you are just new in this job, but we've been traveling, dancing around the world. There is no problem, just give me. I said, okay, right? And the minister told me, for no reason, don't give them the passport until the airport when you are coming back. So I did that. And it is within those when we did the performance at the Broward Center for the Performing Art. And I've given a talk on dance, and there was a black man in the audience who later saw me and came and said, when are you leaving? I said, Monday. This was like Saturday. You free tomorrow? I said, yeah, I'm free tomorrow. I want to have lunch with you. And that was Sam Morrison. Shared with me his vision of building the African American Research Library and Cultural Center and said, I want you to come. I said, no, man, I have quit the West. I'm back home. He said, well, you know what? This is my card. Just keep it on your mind if. So when I went back home, the minister said, you're fired. I still have the newspapers. I said, you cannot fire me. I told you I didn't know this thing. Right? So as I was packing my file to leave the office, one business card dropped from a file. It was the business card of Sam Morrison. So that's the last call I've made at the Ministry of Culture. And he said, you want to come? I said, I don't mind coming. He said, I'll send you the plane ticket. You spend 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks, I'm still on it. I'm still in the 2 weeks. And we built the African American Research Library. Now, why I'm making this point with regard to art and community and the ways in which our town is both cursed and looked upon as a piece of meat, vultures from swooping high on the sky, looking down. But if we end up being in this neighborhood called minority, to the extent that sometimes I even heard some of our own people referring to themselves as minority. So the graft have taken on. Because only ignorant, whether they're white or Latino, will call black people in Miami minority. because we are signatory to the charter. Of the 342 men that founded Miami, 142 of them were black. And the first signature on the charter of Miami, according to Marvin Dunn, is that of a black man. So the question is, how can we be called a minority to the extent that even by talking, I hear when there are two interesting events you should pay attention to. Not on television, but just by the radio, so that you are editing the image and it's the school board meeting, right? Either you are driving and you look at the language of the school board during 2 tenures. The one that Alvaro Carvalho replaced, who was an Afro-Latino. I remember him, Babyface, we used to call him. And you look at how he was referred to by the school board members. I register them as a sociologist. I need these, that, and the ways in which Alvaro can do nothing wrong. The ways in which if you are in Overtown, most likely you will never be exposed to art. That if you have to see art, you got to go to Palm, or you got to go to the Little Haiti Cultural Center, or you got to go to ARC or Palaka. And this is the point I am making about Overtown to respond to those who are telling me you could have been curating a major show in Miami and we don't understand why you are in that place and nobody goes there. But you see, the formulation of nobody going there has an implication. It means we are nobody. Because we come here. So when she said nobody goes there, it struck me, and when I wrote the introduction in the catalog, I made these few points. Nobody goes to that place, man. Right? So in other words, if he is right, we are the nobody. The second aspect is how this neighborhood and this place we are in help us to understand a little bit who we are in this particular time, at this particular time in Miami. And why it is important that if no matter how many successes we have accomplished in the art world, that if all the world is coming to Miami, we shall stand in our land to present from our neighborhood. Because you see, each one of you can close his or her eyes. And you can travel inside the house you were born in, the house you grew up in. No photo, no film, it is needed. You know, now the baby, every birthday, they have to do a film so that he can remember. It's pointless. Just close your eyes. You can go back in time, look at every room to know where your mom's and dad's beds were in the house you grew up. Because that house is a place memory. It's no longer just a house. That is why my encounter with an elder black woman at the grocery store on the corner, and I was in my African flip-flop and all this. Where are you from? Right. But I understood the question, you know. The accent when I say, please, may I have 6 packs of bread? Where are you from? I say, Africa. What are you doing here? I said, well, we're walking into this thing we're calling Art Africa. You know that building? Beside the pool building? I said, yeah. We're trying to bring art and culture there. And she told me, if you walk in the neighborhood late at night, you can still hear them playing and singing, if you can hear. And that is why in the catalog I started with that quotation, my encounter. So what she meant that this neighborhood is a place of memory. You can still hear Ella Fitzgerald if you walk on the streets of our town. You can still listen to Miles. You can still hear Satchmo. Figuratively, that's what she was trying to, that's the message I believe she was trying to tell me. J'ai essayé de présenter un tout petit peu en condensé les bases fondamentales de l'action du commissariat au sein de ce projet. C'est-à-dire que l'activation de l'art dans le développement ou le redéveloppement des quartiers qui ont été des quartiers défavorisés. Et comment cela a amené certains à se poser la question à savoir si ma position de commissaire dans ce quartier où nul ne va ne contribuerait pas à me dégrader au niveau international. Voilà un peu la dynamique dans laquelle l'exposition Back to Black a été inscrite. So how do we represent this? How do you compose a map where our town is the map, but every town is the map of a territory, and the territory is larger than the United States. The territory is the black world. So how do you then use Back to Black? You peg your back to blackness, that is to that heritage, and you construct it as the present and the future for your vision. Because a people have to have a vision of itself in relation to other selves, right? I mean, I have Jewish friends, but my relationship with the Jewish is predicated upon what my wife say, walking them halfway on the road. That is, if you are in the Caribbean, you're visiting, you know, they will always walk you halfway home in the neighborhood. So that walking people halfway is a people having a sense of itself in the map of human geography. So what is the sense of ourself in this map of human geography we call Miami? How is it that for a young black to be sophisticated, they have to see you in the places in South Beach? And that is the ultimate way for you to say that you are sophisticated. That you have to avoid any impression that you are any way linked to Overtown or Opalaka. That even if they push you to the argument, oh, well, my mom was born there, right? So you are still desperately attempting to remove yourself from there in the process of being accepted. So then the black middle class of Miami has to hate himself every day. Because when you look at in the mirror, well, your mom came from our town. You can only, the neighborhood is permanent. So how do we understand that? And to say that to be sophisticated is to be Friday night at the Clyde Killen building, but not at the Sagamore. I have nothing against them. But there has to be a time at which we will look at how we can contribute into making Miami a place where not only a few are always better, but a place in which we can all be better off. And in that process then, there is nothing wrong about us having an art center in Overtown. Actually, I argue if there is any African American neighborhood that ever is supposed to have an art center, it is, and it will always be Overtown. I am arguing that if Overtown disappears, if in the hunger of always building higher and uglier, right? It's like a sardine box. They put one box of sardine on top of the other. There's no perspective. There is nothing. And I'm arguing that if our small black neighborhood disappeared from Miami, watch it. You will have the most diverse manifestation of nothingness. Because you see, you look at in Miami today, nobody can talk to you with a complete sentence. Oh, Loretta, you know, I was there yesterday. It was, you know what I mean? But you're not saying anything. Right? But then, because you want to show that you are trendy, yeah, I get you, girl. Right? So when you look at this overlaying of unfinished sentences, you end up now having a culture that is at the heart of which is nothingness, because it is structured by, you know what I mean? So there are trends that we should not be following, and this is why these neighborhoods functions for the benefit of all, white, black, Jew, everybody. The black neighborhoods are important not only to black people, because if black people are the ones that are the generator of American culture, you may normally want to have them. Now hear my argument. I'm not arguing this for the interests of black people, right? Because that is fundamental anyway. But if a city has a group that has produced the culture that the nation sits on to articulate Americanness, at least in half of the culture, but every city should have a black community. Even if you don't have it, go import it. Go regentrify a neighborhood and bring black people in. But if you are fortunate enough, as we are in Miami, to have a black neighborhood at the birth of the city, then what is the role? And as a political leader, you have the honor and the privilege, because destiny has put on your path this location as your responsibilities. And particularly if in your rise to political power, you have demonstrated that. So what should we expect from the black political leadership, from county to city, with regard to our town, beyond the discourse of diversity? Because if you look at every 10 years since 1940, the United States has somehow developed a concept. You remember when I said melting pot? Well, who's the pot? Who melts in the pot? Salad bowl. Who's the bowl? Who's the salad? So we have to look at how these formulations are developed. You go to Coral Gable, all the sidewalks are paved. Why we cannot have paved sidewalks in our town? These are not some things that we shall fight about. But if we were to have, they can cut part of the neighborhood and give it to Beckham to put a stadium, a mega stadium. But at least they should be able to build us an art center. And that should not be just the black political leadership. It also has to be the entire body of, so the discourse is not about one black commissioner, no. The discourse is about the entire body we call the commission. Because the commission have undertaken a flourishing of cultural institution that it has built. And if the city of Miami will tell you, oh, we're not in the business of building art centers. Yes, you are in the business of building art center. You have built the art center in every other neighborhood except in the black neighborhood. It is only in Miami you will go into historical black neighborhood and you do not see the city attempted at least to build an institution that will preserve that memory. Even in Fort Lauderdale, they build on Sistrunk Boulevard. Before they build it, they have the Meisel Library and Center. Sam Morrison built the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. But why is it these cities understand it today also, and we don't? So these are issues that we deal with into how do you take that, looking into how it is reproduced not only in the United States, but also in Africa. And how then Overtown becoming the site of Art Africa 2017 has to map it. So you have 25 artists coming from different horizons of the African world. Because Overtown is the center of the black world. Because the nation is an imagined community. When you begin to imagine black people, not just as African American, Bahamian, but if you begin to imagine, and you will not be wrong, if you start thinking of the black world as an imagined community, then you will end up having a population larger than China. If you take the entire people of African descent, wherever they may be in the world, we are 200 million higher than the Chinese population. Because in their own population, like in India, for example, if you look at the 1.2 billion Indian, at least 400 million, 320 million are of African descent, and they occupy what we call Goa. And everywhere you go in the world, the presence of black people is due to two phenomena: the slave trade trans-Saharan and the slave trade of the transatlantic we call the Middle Passage. You see the same thing happening again 500 years later. It was extraordinary to see the path of the African migrant to the slave markets of Libya. Only this time is their own choosing, right? And that in the night, they will auction them. Well, for anybody who understand the text, the archives of the Timbuktu Library, you will realize that Bab el Sheikh, where the slave market is taking place today, was also 400 years ago the place where the Africans were marched through the Sahara and brought to Bab el Sheikh and then bought and sold and spread through Yemen, through Saudi Arabia, through all the Middle East, going all the way to Palestine. So look at how history of slavery is repeating itself right here, right now, live on television screen. I have no doubt that given the possibility, black people will be re-enslaved tomorrow. I may be wrong, but that's what I think. Because the extent to which we will go into Africa, the difficulties we will have even to be mentioned in publications that are selling Miami. I'm compiling all the data and I'm looking at them, and I'm just with Philip. So we have brought these artists that are allowing us to look at these issues. And what somebody else told me, you say Back to Black you're doing? I say, yeah. Well, why did you have a white artist then in the show? How? Which is a pertinent question. If you are arguing about issues about African diaspora, why do you have white artists in the show, Babacar? We don't understand. I say, because you haven't seen you have read, but you didn't understand the first sentence of the introduction in the catalog. How artists have provided a counter-narrative to these new assaults that are facing us. But black art has not always been for black people. Black art is for everybody. So second, the artists who are present in Miami at Art Africa, if they were in any gallery today, downtown or on the beach, you will see the headlines. Mr. So-and-so at so-so gallery. And I want to just kind of mention the name. My friend Ablai Konate from Mali is here. I believe he's the most important artist on the continent of Africa today in terms of what I'm looking into art, meaning how art can transform society. That is, the ways in which graduated from Mali, went to Cuba, came back home, moved away from painting on easel, and went back to the fabric. If you have not, you should go and look at it. But there is not only the aesthetic part, that is his research of beauty and everything, but how that approach transformed society, that today he has more than 30 people, women, dyeing the fabrics. Those are not colors that where the fabric is red, you go buy it. No. So the ways in which he maintains that thousands of years ancient knowledge of the indigo dyes and proposing it as a way of talking about himself in the now, that is the contemporary. That's what that's why I'm calling him the most important artist today in Africa. There are more people that you talk to the art world, they will tell you all the names, right? And we have also my friend also, Philippe Dorard from Haiti. All right? Whom perhaps I have written about more than I have written on any other artist, living or dead. But what his particularity also is that art and social transformation, because these artists could have come to the United States, right? And the next thing you hear, they will be making $10, $20 million. But when the earthquake struck in Haiti, that's really where you see Philip's understanding of the relationship of art making, and finding responses to evolving needs. Because imagine that you have immediately on the 11, the earthquake was the 10. On the 11, you have 45,000 children, age 3 to 7, without home, without family, right? While everybody else was focused on, oh, we got to get the shelter and this. So Facebook was kind of just coming in. And Philip's call to the artist, his own country's artists, but also his other artists. I do know that because I chronicle it because I was there. I came. Cacho from Cuba, and they use an old black tradition, black Haitian tradition of space organizing called plastimoon, which literally means the place for the little. And they have used now music, painting, clay molding, right, to allow these children. And they started from one camp. I remember when I came, I was bringing the bottles. And then it expanded. In less than 3 months, they were covering about 7,000 children. Actually, the wife, the first lady of the Dominican Republic, visiting, asked what she could do. And Philip said, we lack space. She went back to the Dominican Republic, sent them all the buses, public transportation buses that were not in use, renovated it, removed the seats, and brought them to Haiti. And I remember, and these children start painting them. Because it was a healing process too. That's why he's important to Back to Black. Thanks for being here. I have also my friend, and these guys, we've been in this project of art and social transformation in terms of research, writing, exhibiting. And every year, whether I show their work or I don't show their work, they come to Art Africa. Even if I don't show their work. And worse, sometimes I don't show their work, but I will ask them to hang the work of others. Right? Two people who knew that, one is Philip, the other one is Peter Wine Lewis, right? And every one of these artists have finished their academic courses. So Philip Dodard today is the director of the National School of Art of Haiti. But when he comes to Miami at Overtown, we just give him a brush and say, bro, go retouch the walls, right? And it's that community participation of these artists. Peter Wine Lewis perhaps is the one. I went home one day and I find this guy with dreadlocks in my bed, right? And I'm like, who is this guy in my bed? They say, oh, he came to see your cousin, but your cousin did not have space at his apartment, so he sent him here. I'm like, okay, how long have you been here? Ah, it's 3 days, 4 days. I said, well, where I'm going to stay? They said, well, my uncle said, you go figure it out. Aren't you from Dakar? I said, yeah. He said, he's not from here. You go out here. And since then, I have the same politics in the sense that all of them, I have to have not to put them in the hotel, but we have to have a member of the community that will host an artist the length of Basel, right? And these friends are not only black, they are white, they are Jewish, right? So Peter is also one like that. And the same story again happened with another one, Brian McFarland, who is also a professor of painting at Massachusetts. All right? I published a book on Peter. I published a book on Philip Dodard. All right? I am working on Brian. So we also appreciate Brian and Peter, their studio is in Beijing, China. But you see them coming every year to Art Basel. I also wanted to look at Basel not just as major accomplished black artists. So I just wanted to use it also in order for these young people to know that they can exhibit beside these black masters. So, and they're doing things that are extraordinary. If you go to the pavilion, you will see the sculptures in fabric, right? And they are the creation of one of our youngest in the group, George Edozie, who came from Nigeria. George, right? Now, he's very interesting, his work, in the narrative he's described. You remember when every time they talked about Africa, they say, oh, African man has so many wives. So George Work focused on the African woman that have the right to have 4 or 5 husbands. So his works, his sculptures are, when you see them, are, and you see the baskets all around. So when you read the piece and the basket, this is a group of people in Nigeria, not tribe, people, right? Again, right? There should be 2018. No black person should refer to any African people as tribe. There is no tribe. Tribe is a European invention to describe the Babacar, who are part of Germany now, right? So the term migrated to Africa during colonization, right? But if the French people, they are just 56 million, can be called the French people, and the Yoruba are 100 million. And you want to still call them tribe, right? What's wrong with that picture? That's what my father said. Words are not natural, the politics of the world. But then, uh, how do we lock these artists with also American artists, right? For example, is Solomon here? Miles Regis here, right? It's mine. Okay. Um, so these are the young artists, right? I started with the teachers, all right? Like Konate has been the director of the Conservatory Institute of Art. Philip Doddard is the director of the National School of Art. Both Brian, Peter, Kofi Kaiga are professor of painting at the University of Massachusetts, right? So look at where they came from and look at what they are doing. When Ablai Konate saw the works of Philip Doddard, he said, but il est dans la statue Dogon. He is working in the Dogon statue. Now, how can a major artist from Africa, who has received all the accolades from the old biennale, can walk to Miami, stand in front of the picture of my house, never saw the painters, and just told me, this guy is exploring the Dogon statue, right? I know it is right. I know he's right. So you see what I'm saying? I know it is right, but I also know he's right. I know it is right that of any Caribbean artist, which is going to get me now to one of my other favorite artists, because I just I got in touch with him on a very strange, particular way. And it is a guy brother from Bahamas, Antonius Tillis. Is Antonius here? Eh? Eh? Antonius Robert. I'm sorry. Is he here? He's not here. Antonius, but if you go down there, you will see the sculpture. And and this, there is something about his work that is just very appealing to me. That's why I put it next to uh, Brian McFarlane, because Brian McFarlane's two paintings are like that, this reconstruction of a cosmos when you look at it, right? Um, Lyric, is Lyric here? France. Is she here? Okay. From Washington, D.C. All right. Miles Davis from California. So, Miles Regis. Well, I said Davis? Well, I said Davis? The brother owes me a drink. If, no, he owes me a drink. If God inspired me to mistake him with Miles Davis, I gotta get a drink. Next, put that in the notes so I can. But that is the scope. And how then that is going to be articulated within the production of text. We call a lady that you will be hearing in the second part of the panel. Uh, so my, you see what I did with the artist, but how do we now link that to the scope, right? That is the production of visual, of lecture on our text. When there is a sister who spent long time in Dakar, and she's here, right? Loretta McNair is there. So Loretta went to Senegal as one of the high-level U.S. administrators, and I'm like, you know what? This is the best opportunity that we will have in Miami, the best collection of one of the few people I know in Dakar. Please, if you go, just buy them, right? Just buy the wall. And when you're coming back to Miami, don't leave them in Dakar, right? This is a segue to the fourth point of about why is it that black people who can afford it should buy black art, right? Now, can you imagine if today some of these guys have four, this one has two or three Jean-Michel Basquiat. Imagine today you could walk into a brother or a sister's house and tell her, I am going to propose your Jean-Michel Basquiat, right? That is 146 million. But to show you that is not nothing, the mainstream art, 1 year, day for day, put Leonardo at 450 million. So my advocacy for the development of black collectors, it's not like what the people say. If you go to the beach, you will hear that a lot of panels talking about art and philanthropy. Now, that's not my interest. My interest is there are some artists whose work must be also in the hands of black people. Abdullah Konate, Philip Zoda, Ryan McFarlane. So that also tomorrow, if a girl, there is nobody today, a young black girl or a black boy who would like to write a master degree dissertation on Jean-Michel Basquiat in that art collection process. If she or he wants to write it from the black radical tradition, he won't get it. They won't give it to him or her. So it is important that these works by these artists to be in black houses. Now, I understand it's expensive, but Maya Angelou also taught us that we should find way out of no way, right? So we can work with these artists, see which way they can uh, facilitate, but it is critical that these works of art to be, this is why, for example, the collection of the Hampton is important. Right? Because when we were doing the Encyclopedia of the African Diaspora, and I was writing Art in the African Diaspora with Nkuru, we could not have anywhere that we could have a collection of black art that will span from 18, 1799 to 2016. Donc c'était très important pour nous d'avoir les tableaux des artistes de descendance africaine entre les mains, qu'une partie soit entre les mains des citoyens de notre groupe. Pas pour simplement des raisons financières, mais surtout pour des raisons de recherche et de publication. So if I am to write on Peter Wine Lewis, for example, I make it a point. I don't want to go to anybody. I want to get access to the collection in my own terms so that when I'm writing, I am not. Everybody in Miami today who organizes black art knows how far you can go in what you're talking, how far you can go into what you're writing on the catalog. They do. So in other words, you have to edit yourself. I'm not in the business of editing myself in any way or shape. So the second aspect for the necessity of collecting this black art is for the children. I have a cousin of mine, half brother in Washington, D.C. And I went to his house, and he has a 7-year-old girl. But the girl has a collection of dolls that were almost, she has all the, how you call it, Barbie? But all the Barbie were white. So I waited until the morning with that girl and went. And I was in Carol. I took all the dolls, put it in the trash bag, put it in the trash. They think today we don't talk to each other. That was the break. So, and I went to the African market and I bought these dolls made of flowers. Right? So, yeah, got 5 badges and 25 black dogs. Right? But don't have 30 dogs, all badges. So, that is a point to highlight the necessity for the black kids to be surrounded by black images. So then you look at the 5 elements we were looking into this back to black. How artists of African descent in the global south have responded to these new assaults that are today besieging the world community. Black artists are not just painting. This back to black is not just an argument for black people, but we're looking at how are we going to find the solution faced to this madness when you have on campus students working with lit up torch in the hand, parading like the Nazi. They're not even hiding it anymore. How artists respond to these things? All right? That is between 2016 and 2017. The police of the United States have killed young blacks more than at any other rate since 1960. How do we respond to that? How do we respond to the fact that the Attorney General of the United States secretly has opened a file to monitor Black Lives Matter. And how do we understand that with 50 years ago, Quentin Pro, the FBI monitoring of Martin Luther King, the FBI monitoring of the Black Panther Party, the FBI killing. So now we are again seeing the same things that happened 60 years ago unfolding in a very subtle way.
Not so subtle.
No, they're not so subtle. Black people don't worry about it. We can take care of it. Right? Because just I said if President Trump wanna talk about these black football player as son of a, let him go and face them and say it. Because if you say anything about a black man's mother, that is because you are illiterate in black culture. Because the guy will turn around and say, "What did you say about my mother?" You got to walk away. Don't answer. The same way if a black woman turn around and put her hands on her head and say, "You say what?" Don't repeat. So you have to have a literacy in blackness that Mr. Trump doesn't have. Because the day he faced a black football player and called his mother's name, the Secret Service better be between them. Right? So, well, how do we understand this? That's what the artist would, that's what Back to Black was trying to address. How do we look at the site, which is the neighborhood, as a place for memory? We have done that, right? How do we look at an understanding of what we have in common as far greater than that which divides us, whether we are black or white? There's something about art, it's depth and competence. You can have successful white artists who are mediocre. You can have successful black artists who are mediocre. So we think to wrap up, c'était simplement pour articuler le concept de la transformation sociale à partir des, des arts. So I am going to stop. Thank you. And if you have questions, either you can ask me, or you can try to find it yourself through the walls.